do y'all know the concept of like the rule of 8, where in constructed environments, if you had a copy of a card that is an enabler, I'm thinking of something like Hedron Crab in Modern Mill, or heck, even for my Tortured Existence Pauper players, y'all would really like a functional reprint of that, right? Modern Mill got Ruin Crab, which really pushed the archetype forward, and over time it got Tasha's Hideous Laughter and Fractured Sanity, and we've had cards added over time, whereas Pauper Tortured Existence has really just been left in the dust. I mean, comment down below if y'all want a functional reprint of Tortured Existence. Really, what it comes down to is that over time, we've seen Wizards add to archetypes, supplement, complement, and add different enablers that bring back archetypes of old and breathe new life into them. But that doesn't feel like the constructed design of now. It feels like, especially if we look at the Modern Horizons 3 set, we have the energy package being printed all in one set. The hyper efficiency of the energy implementation is all from recency. It is all from the recent Modern Horizons set. Not really any of the Kaladesh mechanics are coming through. Any of the machinations of that plane are showing any form of playability. It's all about the Modern Horizons 3 cards. And so this is kind of like a shift in constructed design. EDH WotC confirms my suspicions, my issue with recent set design. 10 out of 10 algorithmic, like algorithm grabbing title. I love it. It just got to do what you got to do to click. That off the bat deserves a like. So let's blow it up and give it a watch. I hope my camera's in the right spot.
Thank you to my channel members and Ko-fi supporters that make these videos possible. Quick announcement before this video begins. For reaching 5K subscribers, I opened a Discord. Link in the pinned comment below if you want to hop on. Now then, let's get into the video.
Yo, speaking of, so obviously they're calling their Discord Oko's Herd, but it like I always think about, like, there's all these like content pieces out there around like, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh players reacting to Magic cards or Hearthstone players reacting to Magic cards. Like, there probably is a video out there at this point, but like, how many people could you show Oko to and make them understand that this is single-handedly the most busted planeswalker ever printed in Magic's history? How many people could you actually get that across to? Like you could probably show, like, I don't know, like give them like a draw to, and a Yu-Gi-Oh player would be like, oh, pot of green, like that must be broken. Like, it's, anyway, how many people could you get them to think that Oko is a busted card?
Hello everyone. We all have a pet deck, and for me, that deck is Farrakha, God of Affliction. So naturally, I keep an eye on any card from a new set that would go well with her.
Okay, my pet decks, if y'all know, One Land Spy and Pauper, some combo as well, Affinity definitely, and Modern Mill. And my pet EDH deck is an Izzet like infinite deck. It plays a bunch of ways to like go infinite with like Kiki and stuff. But it's one where like I was at one point trying to alter all the pieces to be like more like Star Wars themed. I have like Keranos as the helm of it, and Keranos, God of Storms, is altered to be the Emperor from Star Wars. So definitely a personal favorite of mine.
Something stood out to me though when I was sifting through the Golgari cards of Murders at Karlov Manor this year. You see, my Farrakha deck already had Skeleton Crew from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, the set before, and Tormod the Desecrator from Commander Legends. Cards leaving the graveyard effects were part of the deck's little niche. With MKM though, we got a slew of cards that did and enabled exactly that. These Gravebreak cards and cards that enabled them made up the entirety of the Golgari limited theme for that set. Murder at Karlov Manor's main set and supplemental products for that.
Wait, what did that say? So I can accept a self-mill theme and a set giving Farrakha a lot of new toys, but for cards that get this narrow in design, like they were printed for me and in such a high quantity, it makes me feel hollow. Right. And so this is okay. So this is kind of around the idea that like when Commander was first made, it was kind of like the set that, or the format that you played your like junk standard rares in, like your huge standard effects that said like each opponent or all like destroy all creatures and then gain life equal to, gain mana equal to, and it costs like 8 mana, like that is the format where you play this. And now you have all these like hyper efficient threats. I mean, like, you know, Amzu's like a legendary. Then you have like Chalk Outline at 4, Insidious Roots at 2, Snarling at 1, Mortuary is a fetchable quote unquote reanimation target. Aftermath Analyst is 2. Like you have these like now hyper efficient like cards that are like super designed for the archetype, and it's kind of like the homogeneity of the EDH format and the whole like EDH rec effect, where people are now just playing the same thing because it's just correct to be playing cards like this that are specifically designed. It's not about like being creative anymore. Like you have to really go out of your way to be creative in decks.
Murder at Karlov Manor's main set and supplemental products had all at once released 8 whole new cards that I had deemed good enough to include in Farrakha. Right. At first, I was tremendously excited. Who doesn't like new toys? But then after a little bit of time, I realized my deck had just become more homogenous. Simply put, my deck was now close to 10% cards that were designed in tandem. They worked together already. Right. Before, when it was just Tormod and Skeleton Crew, I had a sense of brewer's pride. But now, those interactions were common as the number of...
I will say though, like, I think in constructed formats, like brewing is largely dead. Like, yeah, we have some like rare instances where if you look at the Pioneer format, like the Vampires deck was like largely like one of the more modern cases of like a archetype that came out of nowhere and took over the Pro Tour. And you saw like vampires everywhere, like a testing team just essentially like Sorin Imperious Bloodlord and Vein Ripper out of nowhere. Like vampires was not playable, and all of a sudden vampires is now banned, right? Like it was so good and it came out of nowhere that it really was a brewed strategy. But that doesn't really happen in constructed anymore. But in EDH, 110% like brewing is still possible, and it is 100% possible just not to be playing the meta cards and almost still have like a 1-to-1 effect. Like you could be just as creative, have even bigger, more explosive plays, but you have to put a lot more effort in it now, especially because of the whole like EDH rec effect of the format, where it's like you kind of just go on EDH rec, find the cards that people are playing the most, go to the high synergy section, build out your mana base, and you got a 99. It's a lot easier. Those effects in the deck
doubled, all with one set. Now, in franchise viewers of mine might remember back in the Farrakha deck tech video, I listed MKM as the most influential set to my deck, and I didn't really seem fazed by it at all. Looking back in hindsight though, I certainly feel I was pandered to in a way. And don't get me wrong, Farrakha still plays incredibly and is super fun and unique, but those 8 Murders at Karlov Manor cards opened a Pandora's box for me in a way. Let's explore it. For this topic, I first need to discuss limited design philosophy somewhat. I'm not going to get super long-winded about it. I just want to bring up a couple of vocabulary words. Those being signposts and archetypes. An archetype is a play pattern that is designed to emerge in draft. For example, in M21, life gain was a theme across white and black. You could see this because of cards across rarities that mentioned life in some meaningful way, like Revitalize, Veto Thorn of the Duskrose, and Indulging Patrician. And herein lies the definition of a signpost. Mostly printed at uncommon, multicolor cards like Indulging Patrician here define a set's archetype for a color pair at a glance. Okay. In the past decade or so, we've gone from seeing signposts that hint at a color combination strength, but not necessarily everything they do, to seeing signposts that point to the only thing a color combination does. Right. Let's look at Bloomburrow again to see what I mean.
And in many ways, this is like kind of part of like color identity as well. Like people at this point kind of expect like Boros to be a certain way, Orzhov to be a certain way. And this comes from like the guild lore and all that stuff, and the identity of the Khans and how the shards of Alara work and everything. It's kind of like how the lore is designed in many ways, where if you were to create a slightly different kind of signpost or archetype in a limited environment, like a lot more franchise players might get confused. Like if you were to make like let me think here, card draw, like Drago control in Boros, people would be like, what are you talking about? Drago control in Boros? Like let me let me create some tokens and go wide and throw like a bolt at your face or something.
Did you know that out of 16 lizard cards in Bloomburrow, only 5 of them didn't mention anything about making an opponent lose life? Even still, you can clearly see that 2 of the 5 remaining cards, that being Steam Path Charger and Agate Blade Assassin, was also meant to enable the archetype. leaving us with 3 out of 16 cards that are lizards that didn't lean into the new lizard gimmick. This is a fine way to design for a limited environment for newer players, as it lets them onboard easier by saying, oh, look at Fireglass Mentor here. Lizards must care about life loss. Even so, it can still cause problems in Limited by making open lanes too easy to identify and can lead to not enough tension in the drafting pod. Enough about Limited though. When we get to Constructed, we see...
This is a Magic aficionado right here. I know that I've seen them play like some Vintage Cube, I believe, like on their channel. It seems like they have a very storied knowledge. By
densely packing a set with strict archetypes, you end up with a package problem. Basically meaning that a card feels useless or stranded without another card that was printed in the same set as a part of the same package.
Is that a problem though? I mean, okay. You know, it's kind of funny to see that, like, with all the energy going around from Modern Horizons 3, that Aetherworks Marvel is not a thing. I know Aspiring Spike tried to put out like a deck list, and like he's one of the brewers out there that really I'm always interested to see what deck list he's throwing out there at the beginning of sets. Definitely want to when he gets early access, I'm paying attention, right? But interesting.
Take standard Rakdos Lizards, for instance, which makes up 4.4% of the standard metagame. Only 8 of the 32 creatures in this deck don't come from Bloomburrow. Now, this deck is far from one of the best decks in the format. Most standard decks actually have a good smattering of cards from different sets. But when we look at casual deck building or modern, we can see where this package problem becomes malignant. I am doubtful that many of you would describe energy decks in modern as fun to deck build around. Even if you like the deck's play patterns, the card choices are practically made for you.
Also, first thing, yo, shout out to the Mardu energy players that play Obnix. Obnix plus like Obnix is like a weird, like a Johnny thing, right? Like there's like some sack synergies and all that stuff. Shout out to Obnix, honestly. So they're designed to work together. Yeah, okay, but is Flage really designed to, like, Flage is, my apologies for like the throat, by the way, here. Flage is kind of just like a good card. I don't know if Flage is really designed to work with all of this, because a lot of things that, like, a common thing that a lot of players will say that play Flage without like enabling it is like, you're really only reanimating it like once a game. There aren't too many ways to actually fill your yard to enable it more than that in an average game, especially just because you're an aggro deck. Like, you generally close out the game a lot quicker. Maybe you go a little bit longer because the Boros version plays like the One Ring, but yeah, like like Arena of Glory and Flage like kind of come together, but that's just like kind of like a fun synergy. Like I think the rest of it makes sense though. Like Ocelot Pride, Guide, Amped, Galvanic Discharge, sure.
Because all the cards' strongest synergies were printed alongside each other in the same set. This extends to Casual Commander as well, where I noticed the issue first. When you want to build squirrels in Commander, if you want synergy, you're probably going to be running most of the squirrel cards in Bloomburrow since they all care about food. You'll probably go to Middle Earth in that case and use some of the food cards there. Oh, and what about the food package in Modern Horizons 2? And you can see the problem. We're not shopping here based on individual cards we think are cool together, but instead by set packages that were designed.
Yo, the OCD is killing me here. Elk, why is the bottom edge of this card touching this, but the bottom edge of Peregrine Took is not touching this? Ah, why is it at different y-axis values? You're killing me. You're killing me right now. No, I'm also, wait, why is the left side edge gap smaller than the left side edge here? And I'm completely joking here. just thought I'd point it out for all the OCD heads here.
In tandem to be working together. And what we end up with is a deck with predictable play patterns and a non-unique feeling. All of this discussion begs the question of what I feel are some examples of a deck that are on the opposite side of this problem. Ones that showcase a mix of cards from across sets. For me, the prime example of one of these is Miracles. Library manipulation comes in a lot of shapes and sizes. So
this is kind of the Modern Horizons effect, though. Like this is a set design issue specifically because of Modern Horizons. It isn't necessarily a set design problem. It's a product problem. The inundation of too many products ultimately leads to this because you have to design all these sets to matter. Like, why should people care about these sets outside of their regular standard following? They want to hyper inject these synergies into these sets to make you care about Modern Horizons because they know, everyone knows that Modern Horizons 1 completely changed the modern format. Modern Horizons 2 completely changed the modern format. Modern Horizons 3 completely changed the modern format. And so you want these hyper synergies in there. So this is a product problem, not necessarily a set design problem. But I see what they're saying in extrapolation to how it affects EDH, though. I will say that also with the inundation of like hundreds of new legendaries every set, it's only inevitable that you will have a set that like hyper enables a commander or two. I think that's just like statistically speaking, that's true. But from a constructed sense, we don't have that gradual design of standard sets where we have Delirium a couple years ago or like 1 year ago, and then next year we have like another graveyard synergy that isn't Delirium. They can't call it Delirium, but it's functionally Delirium. They just don't want to put Delirium in that set, so it kind of synergizes with the Delirium from the last year. And so you have like these slow additions to your older formats over time, and then you can play them in Modern, play them in Pioneer, and stuff like that. But again, this is a situation, this is an issue with product of how the philosophy of set design due to something like Modern Horizons 3 and cycle like this has changed.
Ends up being Magic. A Frankenstein of a ton of different eras of Magic design. Surveil lands are probably one of the coolest new additions. Since fetches would already shuffle your brainstorms, now they could also manipulate the top card of the deck after the shuffle. A deck like Miracles is cool because typically there's only one Miracle card it's running, at least in the Modern.
Wow, I mean, yo, shout out to the new Dustmorn reanimation like spell, the creature that costs 6 for 4, like it's 6 mana for a 4/4, and then when you can miracle that out for 2, when it enters, you reanimate a creature. Absolutely insane.
Legal variant. That being Terminus. And the deck is built around supporting that card's power by using cards that never were, I think anyway, designed to work specifically with miracles, like Omen of the Sea. Anyway, what is the grand point I'm trying to make here? I brought the topic of today's videos to a few of my peers, and Snail mentioned a conversation he had with his friends Hans about this conundrum, who had a pretty poignant take that summed up how I felt about the issue. He talked about how this narrow package design based philosophy feels like the actual fun is being had by the game designers, and the players are just expected to simulate the deck building creations of those designers with little deviation.
In a certain way, though, that's perfectly, I think that's like fair to say that they're allowed to do that, right? Like, I think designers are allowed to invoke a sense of want and a sense of their own emotions into it. And I think maybe that's how that translates. So I think that's perfectly fair.
Basically, R&D is making a jigsaw puzzle. Well, I want things that don't fit together so I can make a found object sculpture. That brings me around to my last point on the matter. That this era of design isn't technically all, but
in many ways I would say like the casual player probably wants the jigsaw puzzle, right? Because the jigsaw puzzle is much more approachable than a found object, right? If you were to go to like a museum or like an art gallery, there's a reason that I think a lot of casual people, maybe like families with their kids or like school trips and stuff like that, a lot of these people what you would call the art casuals would go to like the more clear, succinct structures, statues, and paintings, the one that showcase like big scraping landscapes and like big sculptures and historical figures that they can like recognize. And that's kind of the jigsaw puzzle. Whereas if you wanted to make something like a found piece like art or something more abstract or like something that's like very like a very odd mix of like colors or what a casual would consider odd, then that's not going to get as many people like watching it and everything. And I think, again, this is just like the inundation of the amount of casuals that have entered because of Commander, because of our product design. And so we've maybe pushed out folks like 3-3 Elk that want to kind of
I know
explore.
People who hate deck building probably love the fact that R&D is making more obvious synergies between cards. Like I've mentioned before, this philosophy is also good for new players getting into the game. Some people even just like jigsaw puzzles despite not being new. Even I like to build a simple guilty pleasure synergy deck now and again. But there are certainly major flaws that can't be ignored. The title of this video wasn't clickbait, as the catalyst for it was Mark Rosewater's 2024 State of Design article, where he confirmed that he identifies this as a design problem, at least.
So while players did enjoy the main themes, we felt we overdid them. Too many cards, probably when modern that's redesigning, felt that the less charming. Okay, yeah, so this was kind of like in the idea of like people just didn't understand, like in the Outlaws of Thunder Junction set, like why everyone had cowboy hats and why they were even doing the set. It just felt like a wacky Wild West theme. Whereas I wonder how like Bloomborough and Duskmorn are going to be received more so as themes. Like maybe the Wild West wasn't a great theme, but like a horror theme set like Duskmorn will be better received. So maybe it's just like choosing the theme.
To the extent we saw it in Modern Horizons 3, the home of Boros energy. Hopefully this means that the design team is more vigilant about homogeneity in all sets going forward, but also keeps an eye out to ensure that a set doesn't become too dissonant either. Anyway, tell me, what is your opinion of the topic? Has the secret tech in one of your decks become commonplace as a Magic mechanic today?
So what I will say again, it's kind of like what I was saying, where the amount of casuals that have entered because of like Secret Lairs and Universes Beyond and Commander, those are the people that want the jigsaw puzzle, just kind of working with the example that Elk was talking about. And the abstract design is more so for the kind of invested Magic player. I would say Elk is definitely like with their knowledge of like limited formats. As someone who's been playing Magic for like 10 years, over that, like that's not something I have a knowledge of. That's something that is a very unique and great skill that they have for someone that is probably more invested in Magic in a way that a casual would never will. So I think they would like to explore that because of the angle that they have in limited, wanting to explore, wanting to try out like ones and two ofs that have great value in a limited environment, like stuff like that. Like things like that have a lot of value. Maybe just not for the casual player that's just getting into it first. So they have all these like front facing, like almost superficial things that they bring people in with, like the homogeneity, and then they play a Commander game. They're like, oh wow, that card is so cool, I didn't know that existed. And then their brain starts to work. They add it in their 99, they add another card. Like the exploration of Magic increases over time, and it's very much possible in Commander. But I think this is actually, the set design issue is more so a problem with constructed Magic. Like constructed Magic is genuinely getting screwed over because of stuff like this. Again, because of like product design. Whereas for Commander, they're able to like self-correct a little bit more. And again, as I mentioned, with the amount of legendaries coming out, it's only a matter of time when someone like Elk has their Commander like hyper catered for, and they have this feeling of homogeneity. So again, I think this is like fine for EDH. I definitely do see the problem, but I think for constructed Magic, it's been the thing that a lot of constructed players don't realize that they've been screaming about for a while. So highly agree. Leave a like on the video. It's going to be linked down below. Leave a comment on there. And again, give this video a boost on the algorithm that it deserves. Great video, Elk. Definitely looking out for more from you as a fellow MTGO creator.